So Job 6. Then Job answered and said, "Oh, that my vexation were weighed, and that all my calamity laid in the balances. For then it would be heavier than the sand of the sea. Therefore my words have been rash. For the arrows of the Almighty are in me, my spirit drinks their poison, and the terrors of God are arrayed against me. Does the wild donkey bray when he has grass, or the ox low over his fodder? Can that which is tasteless be eaten without salt? Or is there any taste in the juice of the mallow? My appetite refuses to touch them. They are food that is loathsome to me. Oh, that I might have my request, and that God would fulfill my hope, that it would please God to crush me, and that he would let loose his hand and cut me off. This would be my comfort. I would even exult in pain unsparing, for I have not denied the words of the Holy One. What is my strength that I should wait? And what is my end that I should be patient? Is my strength the strength of stones, or my flesh bronze? Have I help in me when resource is driven from me? He who withholds kindness from a friend forsakes the fear of the Almighty. My brothers are treacherous as a torrent bed, as torrential streams that pass away, which are dark with ice, and where the snow hides itself. When they melt, they disappear. When it is hot, they vanish from their place. The caravans turn aside from their course. They go up into the waste and perish. The caravans of Turna look. The travelers of Sheba hope. They are ashamed because they were confident. They come there and are disappointed. For you have now become nothing. You see my calamity and are afraid. Have I said, make me a gift, or from your wealth offer a bribe for me, or deliver me from the adversary's hand, or redeem me from the hand of the ruthless? Teach me and I will be silent. Make me understand how I have gone astray. How forceful are upright words. But what does reproof from you reprove? Do you think you can reprove words when the speech of a despairing man is wind? Do you even cast lots over the fatherless and bargain over your friend? But now be pleased to look at me, for I would not lie to your face. Please turn. Let no injustice be done. Turn now. My vindication is at stake. Is there any injustice on my tongue? Cannot my palate discern the cause of calamity? Has not man a hard service on earth? And are not his days like the days of a hired hand, like a slave who longs for the shadow, and like a hired hand who looks for his wages? So I am allotted months of emptiness, and nights of misery are apportioned to me. When I lie down, I say, when shall I arise? But the night is long, and I'm full of tossing till the dawn. My flesh is clothed with worms and dirt, and my skin hardens, then breaks out afresh. My days are swifter than a weaver's shuttle, and come to their end without hope. Remember that my life is a breath. My eye will never again see good. The eye of him who sees me will behold me no more. While your eyes are, while your eyes are on me, I shall be gone, and the cloud fades and vanishes. So he who goes down to Sheol does not come up. He returns no more to his house, nor does his place know him any more. Therefore, I will not restrain my mouth. I will speak in the anguish of my spirit, and I will complain in the bitterness of my soul. Am I the sea or a sea monster that you set guard over me? When I say, my bed will comfort me, my couch will ease my complaint, then you scare me with dreams and terrify me with visions, so that I would choose strangling and death rather than my bones. I loathe my life. I would not live forever. Leave me alone, for my days are a breath. What is man that you make so much of him, and that you set your heart on him? Visit him every morning and test him every moment. How long will you not look away from me, nor leave me alone till I swallow my spit? If I sin, what do I do to you, you watcher of mankind? Why have you made me your mark? Why have I become a burden to you? Why do you not pardon my transgression and take away my iniquity? For now I shall lie in the earth, but you shall seek me. You will seek me, but I shall not be. And that concludes chapter 7.
Joni Mitchell's song is running through my head.
Which one?
She has a song called The Lament of Job.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And
You shared it with me once.
Yeah, I think the chorus goes, "Oh, you tireless watcher, what have I done to you?" That's the whole gist of this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, all right. So Job suffers everything. In chapter 3, he laments in that, just like, that's probably one of the most moving chapters in the whole book for me. It's sort of like the whole chapter is about being uncreated and not wanting to be born. And then he asks the question, why am I still alive? Basically, why does God give breath to a man who's suffering? And then Eliphaz kind of subtly rebukes him, tells him of that frightening dream that he has, and then encourages him to seek God and repent. And so there's this, like, Joseph kind of pointed this out, which is that Job is kind of taking Eliphaz's advice. Let me see. It's in chapter 7, 11 through 21. Job is actually praying to God. That's all towards God. It starts with the verse, "Therefore I will not restrain my mouth. I will speak in the anguish of my spirit. I will complain in the bitterness of my soul." And then he says, "Am I the sea or a sea monster that you guard over me?" So he actually is starting to pray specifically towards God.
But don't you think he always was? Like in the lament, he's talking to God too, because he's asking God to shut up his mother's womb and darken the day he was born. Like nobody else but God could do that, right? I mean, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the first time he speaks directly to God.
Okay.
Like using, I could be wrong, but that's kind of what I've read. And because when he says "you" there, it's a specific Hebrew word that means he's addressing the Lord rather than his friends or just lamenting. Because even in the beginning of chapter 6, he's lamenting again. But it seems to be kind of he's just speaking it out. And I kind of get the feeling in chapter 3 that he does that too, but I think he does say it to, like, he's obviously saying it to someone. It's not just to his friends, and it's not directly towards God either. So
not formally, but that gets back to that idea of doing things by the book.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and this is the problem I see that his friends have with him, is he's not doing things by the book, right? You know, like right after that, chapter 7, Bildad speaks, and he says, "How long will you speak with these things, and how long shall the words of your mouth be like a strong wind?" In other words, this isn't how it's done. You don't just say things out into the universe, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? Like, they don't get it, you know? And that's why I get the sense that Job is always talking to God, because there is nothing else for Job to talk to. He's not talking to the universe. You know, he's talking to God, right? And his friends are all like, "This is not how you talk to God. There's prescribed ways to do this, you know."
Mm-hmm.
And one of the other things that just this, you know, going over this part here that really stood out to me was, we talked about it in the last one, where they seem to have a mechanistic view of God. But what if we stretch that out to them having a mechanistic view of the world? Because, like we like to think that the ancients didn't have that, right? But it's a cause and effect relationship that you have with the world. And it's one of the easiest patterns to pick up on is cause and effect. If you stick your hand in the fire, you get burnt. That's like the lessons you learn as a small child, right? Mm-hmm. And that's the beginning of cause and effect for you, that pattern, right? And that gives you somewhat, I mean, of course, we've graduated to like an unwieldy mechanistic view where we can't even separate what isn't mechanistic anymore, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we referred to that in the previous videos, the doctrine of retribution. Specifically, it's
right.
You do good things will happen. If you do evil, you'll be punished.
Yeah, it's a cause and effect pattern reading of the mm-hmm. world, right? And that is a mechanistic view, in my opinion. It's like mm-hmm. the headwaters of technocracy.
Right. Yeah.
It is.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's even I think it's even a little bit, it's not even so straightforward because Eliphaz has that dream. He almost has a prophetic vision mm-hmm. that, it's when he's lying on his bed and then the spirit comes up over him and he can't discern it. And it says, who is righteous before God? And then, it's not, Eliphaz, as we'll see when we get into Bildad and Zophar, Eliphaz is probably the most balanced of the friends as far as like his approach, because he talks a little bit about the mystical, he talks a little bit about the tradition, talks about wisdom. Whereas like, yeah, we'll get into Bildad, but Bildad and then Zophar, like Zophar is like so just sort of straightforward that you're just like, all right, dude.
Eliphaz is a good example of Luke's. You can be right but be wrong.
Right.
That's a really good example of that idea.
Well, and I also like to, I really do. I think Eliphaz is a believable character as far as like the wise old man. Like he's the wise old man that I almost want to steel man him into a character that is trying to help.
Sure. But this is the thing I think about when I think about Eliphaz's dream. Eliphaz's dream seems to reiterate what he already believes. That no one is righteous, right?
Yeah.
The question isn't posed to Eliphaz. It's almost a seductive way of concreting that thought into his brain.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So now he's had a visitation that has confirmed.
Oh yeah.
All of the things that he believes, right?
Well, that's people, man. That happens to us.
Right. Right.
So that in that regard, I have sympathy for Eliphaz, even though because we have the view, we got to see what the conversation was in heaven. We got to hear that Job was blameless and upright before God. Yeah, and so we have like this inside information.
Yeah.
And
it doesn't. Yeah.
Yeah, and they don't. And so it's easy. It makes it easier for us to see where they're going wrong, but also taking them like kind of trying to be at their viewpoint. They're trying to make sense of this whole disaster too. And
I have an interesting thought about them making sense of this.
Yeah.
And being friends. I don't know what you think. I don't know if I heard this when I was when I was listening to the audio version, and I was like, oh, interesting. So in verse 22, I think, of chapter 6, Job said, actually, starting in verse 19, the troops of Tema looked, and companies of Sheba waited for them. They were confounded because they had hoped. They came thither and were ashamed. So it seems like he's talking about his trade company being ambushed there.
Well, it talks about how they're looking for an oasis in the desert.
What is chapter 17 say in your version? Because mine is 17. I mean, verse 18. 17.
Mine says in verse 18, the caravans go aside from their course. They go up into the waste and perish. The caravan of Tema look, and the traveler of Sheba hope. They were ashamed because they were confident, and they come there and were disappointed. They're in the desert, and they actually go off course to find an oasis, and there's no oasis there, and they die. And Job's saying that's like, just before this, he says, he who withholds kindness from a friend forsakes the fear of the Almighty. And he's saying, like, listening to you is like me going off course,
right,
hoping that I would find an oasis in you, and I'm dying. Your words. And what's interesting about that, I don't want to go too, you have something to say about this, but no, I lost my train of thought. Go ahead and say what you.
Sorry. Well, what I thought was interesting was he says, for now you are nothing. You see my casting down and are afraid. Did I say, bring unto me, or give me a reward of your substance? I thought that was an interesting turn of phrase there, because he's directly addressing that he never asked for their help. He never asked them for anything. And so what are they afraid of? Are they afraid he's going to ask them for something? He's going to ask them to bail him out, right?
Yep. Yeah, that's exactly what he was saying.
Yeah, and you think of the substance that Job had, like what we talked about in the first, right? Like he was a major player. And they're like, oh, crap. Now what? And I wondered if they had some investment in some of his companies, to put it in modern terms, right? And if they were showing up like now this is just me getting carried away, and like a board meeting, right? They're like, okay, it's like Elon. Okay, Elon, you're covered in boils. You've lost everything. What do we, what's going on? We have to
shore up our losses. And
we got to figure this out, because there's a lot riding on this. There is a lot riding on this. If you think about who Job was and what he had, like if he was feeding a country and supplying, he was the supply chain, right? He was it. And so when it got into that I was like, oh, that's an interesting turn of phrase. That's not something you would say to your friends. That's more like something you would say to your business partners or your business acquaintances or people who have an interest in your good well-being, right? Because it affect their well-being.
Right. And even just like someone who has just suffered all this, and then the friends that come are wealthy, and he's like, I don't want anything from you except for the kindness from a friend. That's
right. But the interesting question is, why are you afraid? Did I ask you to bail me out? That's
yeah.
Right. He's really really poking at something there. And I don't know, it just kind of puts an interesting twist on it. It doesn't necessarily have to be true, but I think that there's something there.
Well, in verse 21, he says, it's when he says that, but he says, you have now become nothing. You see my calamity and are afraid. He's almost saying that, like, you are scared of this. I see you're frightened of this. And because of that, I know that you have nothing to say to help me. You don't have anything.
So when he says you have become nothing, you think he's saying that means to him?
They have nothing to offer. He was hoping they were an oasis.
Right.
And not in the sense that they would give him stuff or bail him out, or he was hoping that they were an oasis of kindness and some kind of help him figure this out.
Well, he says further on, he says, did I ask you to deliver me from the enemy's hand or redeem me from the hand of the Almighty or the mighty? Mm-hmm. Teach me, and I will hold my tongue, and cause me to understand wherein I have erred. How forcible are right words. But what does your arguing reprove? That's a really good question.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like what is the necessity of you arguing with me right now? What is that? What is that doing to help me or to help the situation? Mm-hmm. Right? What is it even reproving? I've lost everything. It's gone. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah, that's a great point. He's almost like he's confused now. He's like, what are you guys doing?
Yeah, and then he says right after, he says, do you imagine to reprove words?
Mm-hmm.
Words? Like, what are those, right? And the speeches of one that is desperate, which are like the wind. Is this what you're thinking? You're going to reprove the wind? Mm-hmm. The words?
Yeah, that's interesting, because he's almost saying, like, if I'm being rash, if I'm speaking out of my suffering and this means nothing, why are you arguing with it?
Right. And that's pointing back at their mechanistic worldview, because they want him to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
And that is why they're arguing with him.
Yeah, because they sense there's something deeply, deeply wrong here, or something going wrong that they don't understand.
Yeah, that he did something wrong. And so if you take it, like if you look at the beginning of the story and you see everything that Job had, when Job loses everything, everyone else loses everything. Right? Mm-hmm. And their salvation, the winter is coming, right? It's Game of Thrones, like winter is coming and we've lost everything. And what now, right? Job, you need to fix this, that. And so I think with that statement there, like, what are you arguing with me for?
Mm-hmm.
It's pointing, it's Job suddenly realizing that this isn't, that this line of thinking, this mechanistic thinking isn't going to solve my problem, right? Because I lost everything. It's gone.
Yep.
Right. And so if you think that you can talk me into something so that everything will be restored, you're wrong. Like Job already knows that.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That's what it seems like to me anyway.
Yeah. Because he knows what they're thinking, because he says in 28, or what is it? 29, just 28, 29, 30 here.
Mm-hmm.
It says, but now be pleased to look at me, for I will not lie to your face. He's like, listen to me. Please turn. Let no injustice be done. Turn now. My vindication is at stake. And he says, is there any injustice on my tongue? Cannot my palate discern the cause of calamity? He's like, I'm telling you, I did nothing.
And he's also saying, I know I can't taste anything evil here in the works, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's that. Is there iniquity in my tongue? Cannot my taste discern perverse things? Don't you think I would know? That's what he's asking. Don't you think I would know?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And they don't believe him, right? And so it's for him, it's like, then why are you arguing with me? Because you don't believe me, right? You think that it has to be this law of retribution, that there is no other explanation. These are people who have never entertained a God that is not mechanistic.
Mm-hmm.
They've never thought about God as a friend, let's say, something like that.
Well, yeah. And if it's true what Job is saying, that he is innocent, and if it's also true that he has been, and that he suffered all this stuff, then what is going on?
Yeah, like that. Well, see, that blows apart their frame.
So they have a choice, right? Right. And Job's picking up on this. They can either believe him and help him deal with the problem. Job's trying to grapple with the actual problem.
Yeah.
And his friends are arguing with him to basically support their tradition and their frame, or their whatever it is, their system.
Yes.
And there's so right after that in Job 7, so at the end of Job 6 says, is there any injustice on my tongue? Cannot my palate discern the cause of calamity? Then he sort of goes and says in verse 1, has not man a hard service on earth? Are not his days like the days of a hired hand? Like a slave who longs for a shadow, like a hired hand who looks for his wages. So I am allotted months of emptiness, and nights of misery are apportioned to me. He's sort of saying, like, isn't this just the way it is? Isn't this something we already know about that we're not dealing with?
Exactly. Yes.
And he's like, and then in verse 7, he's like, remember, my life is a breath. My eye will never again see good.
Yeah.
And then in verse 11, he says, therefore, I will not restrain my mouth. I will speak of the anguish of my spirit.
Right.
And so he's like, why are we not talking about this? Yeah, and because I have nothing left to lose, I have nothing to gain. I have nothing to lose. All I have is my breath in me. So I'm just going to speak what's in my heart. And and you want to argue against me, and I'm not trying to lie. I'm not trying to manipulate. I'm not trying to gain anything. And then this is when he's addressing God, is 11 through 21, where he says, he starts out, am I the sea or the sea monster that you guard over me? He's also kind of saying to God, am I chaotic? Am I a monster that you are doing this to me? Because Job's trying to figure this out too.
Well, actually, when I was reading that, I was thinking to myself, it's like he says it in chapter 6 too. He says something similar in verse 11. What is my strength that I should hope, and what is my end that I should prolong my life? Is my strength the strength of stones, or is my flesh of brass? And it's like he's saying, look, don't you know what I'm made of? like I'm just this totally vulnerable thing, right? And this is kind of what I've been talking about when I talk about the body, and I say, why do I have a body that can be poked?
Right, be pierced.
Right? That can be pierced. It can be pierced. That is like full of nerves that make sure that if anything penetrates this barrier, I'm in pain, right? Like, why do I have to have that body? Why couldn't I be an armadillo? Like
jellyfish or something.
Just curl up in a ball, right? Nothing can get me. And that seems like that's what Job is talking about here in these places. Like, is my strength the strength of stones, or is my flesh of brass? Like,
where is that at?
That's 6:12.
Okay.
And then he says the similar, am I a sea or a whale?
Mm-hmm.
Like, am I this giant unruly thing? No, I'm just this little guy who's totally vulnerable, and you know where I am all the time and what I'm doing, right? I'm not a sea monster. I'm not the sea. I'm not giant. I'm not huge, because then he goes in 17, or no, where's that? What is man that thou art mindful of? Where's that? Here, 17, yeah. What is man that thou should magnify him, and that you should set your heart upon him? Job already sees that humanity is something that God has set his heart upon, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's exactly the opposite of what Eliphaz said, which is man is nothing. He's the dirt. God doesn't care about him. And when he does, and then Job has the opposite. He's like, why are you focusing on me? Why the intensity?
Yeah. And that tells him something. That kind of intensity tells him that God, that's why he calls him the watcher, right?
Yep.
Because there's something about humanity that is special. And that's why I think Job says, is my strength the strength of stones? Is my flesh of brass? Am I a sea? Am I a whale? Like, what the hell? Get with the program. You know that I'm this thing, right? I'm just nothing. That's what Job is saying. I'm nothing. But at the same time, he's saying, but I seem to be everything to you.
Exactly.
Right?
Yep. Yeah. Why not just crush me and get this all over with? That's what he's saying. Why are you drawing this out? What is good? And anyone that suffered anything over a long period of time has always had the thought, like, God, why do I keep having to deal with this? Why is this? Yeah,
which is interesting because most people think like Eliphaz and Bildad and the other guy, Zohar, is that his name?
Zophar.
And they think they're nothing. They would never, let's not say never, but Job is already, okay, so let me think about it this way, or let's think about it this way. I think a lot of women would relate to this, men not so much, but you can think about it in these terms. If something is hunting you, right? You would wonder why. Why me? That would be your question. What is it about me that makes you want to hunt me? Can't you hunt something else? Right? And it seems like Job is saying that in here, in these phrases. Is he feels that piercing gaze of God, right? The watcher.
Yeah. I mean, he even says at the beginning of chapter 6 that the arrows of the Almighty are in me.
Yeah.
And there's poison on them, and my body's drinking in the poison, and these terrors fill me.
Yeah.
And
yeah. But then, when he says here in verse 11 of 7, therefore I will not refrain my mouth. I will speak in the anguish of my spirit. I will complain in the bitterness of my soul. Like I said, I don't think he's never talking. I think he's always talking to God. He's talking to his friends, but he's also saying that in the presence of God. He knows, right? Because God is the watcher. Okay. God's watching him. And so in light of all of that, Job has this tremendous courage to claim, like McDonald talks about, right?
Yep.
To claim an answer from God. And he does get into that later, too, in a really great way. So he's just like, look, I've lost everything. I don't want anything from you people. Okay. I didn't ask you for anything. And who does God think I am? And why is he hunting me?
Mm-hmm.
And until I get an answer, I'm going to say these things.
Mm-hmm.
That's essentially what he's doing.
Yep.
And he doesn't feel like, he's not afraid.
No.
He's not the least bit afraid.
He's not afraid to speak. He's sort of haunted, but he's not afraid.
Well, he's not afraid of God. I don't think so, because he has to know God well enough to know that he has the right to demand, right? He has the right to complain. That's basically what I'm trying to get at with this. Am I a stone? Am I brass? Yeah. Am I, right? I'm just this, you made me. And he actually goes into that later. And so because he knows God made him, and God knows what he's made of, he's taking on that. He's demanding an answer from his creator, you know?
Mm.
Yeah.
I mean, this is an interesting point, because I think, I don't know, we'll probably talk about this more later on, because there's points where Job, if I remember correctly, talks about how he wants to bring his case, but how can he?
Yeah, exactly. That's the mystery to him.
Mm-hmm.
That's the part that he's trying to figure out, and his friends aren't helping him with that part at all.
Yeah, because they're terrified of the implications of all of this. And they don't want to help Job if Job's been punished. Why would
Job's demanding an answer? Like, imagine Job is demanding that God come and speak to him. That's what he wants. Yep. Okay. And they're like, don't do that. You know? Mm-hmm. Oh my God. Like, you're calling down God? No, just do these things over here, you know, and then you can placate him this way, and he'll stay up there and out of our hair, you know?
Yeah. And I think it's interesting. Like Job, like you had that conversation with Luke and Ken. Mm-hmm. But you talked about moving the horse around the pen. Like Job is on the move. he's being moved. And there's like, it's hard to read through the whole middle part of Job, because it's poetic. It's, you know, it's long, it's lengthy. It seems like it repeats itself over and over again. But if there is like, just like the horse getting moved around the pen, you're like, we're just going in circles. No, we're training. Like, it's not training. It's something is happening.
We're like
in the repetition. And so as Job goes through these repetitions, because he'll lament and he'll pray and he'll lash out at his friends, and then he'll lament and he'll pray and he'll lash out at his friends. But there is a progression happening in his thoughts. And like, I don't, you know, he is praying to God and asking these questions, but he hasn't formed his case yet. And this case sort of gets built up as Job is moved through all this.
Yeah, it's crystallizing.
Mm-hmm. Right? And it's really interesting to think that this like, this is the reason for all of this is for this to there's something inside of Job that needs to come out, kind of thing. And it doesn't come out until he's been put through the ringer, so to say.
Well, like I said in that conversation with Ken, you know, and Luke, you can't experience at-one-ment until you've been divided, right? Mm-hmm. Like, there's this, you can't know healing until you've been sick, right?
Yeah, the one who's been forgiven much loves much.
You can't put things back together again until they're broken. Right? So
Yeah, and after you fail, after a failure and you get back up, you're more than you were before because you have it's just the case. Like, that's how we learn. That's how we grow. That's how we transform.
Right.
That's
that. What I really loved about this part here was how Job just sees things as they are. Right? That's what like when he says, is my strength the strength of stones? No. Like, he's talking about what is. Mm-hmm. And his friends they're not seeing the things for the way they are. They're how could I say this? I haven't really given it much thought how they're seeing things. It's like they see things for what they're supposed to be. Like, they're trying to...
Yeah, they're idealists or something.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the word. Idealists. So they have this ideal, right? And it has to be fulfilled. And Job's just like, look, I didn't do anything wrong here. Way too much is being expected of me. I'm this vulnerable, small little thing. God's got his gaze fixed on me. He's hunting me. And I need an answer.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of wonder, like, is this... I mean, I think that Job would have to be this person at his core in order to deal with this the way he's dealing with it right now in the midst of his pain and suffering. But there's also the question as to whether or not he's able to access that because he has nothing else, right? Mm-hmm. He is stripped to his core, mm-hmm. in a sense, right? And he's finding it at the same time. And I guess that's all he has. And maybe that's what gives him such great courage, because the only thing he has is himself. Right.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's what God believes in the very beginning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because God trusts Job.
Exactly.
And believes he's not going to curse him. But it's more than just that little, is Job going to curse him or not? Like, God's doing something even more here than trying to answer this question about that Satan posed.
Right.
Like, Satan was being used by God to do something. There's something bigger happening. And that little question posed by Satan at the beginning was the thing to start the process. But what we're seeing here is something transformative, and we're seeing God create, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Any other thoughts on 6 or 7? I think we could move on to Bildad, but just chapter 8. Then Bildad the Shuhite answered and said, "How long will you say these things, and the words of your mouth be a great wind?" This guy, man. Sometimes I think like parts of Job are supposed to be written as a comedy, because this is all right. "How long will you say these things, and the words of your mouth be a great wind? Does God pervert justice, or does the Almighty pervert the right? If your children have sinned against him, he has delivered them into the hand of their transgression. If you will seek God and plead with the Almighty for mercy, if you are pure and upright, surely he will rouse himself for you and restore your rightful habitation. And though your beginning was small, your latter days will be very great. For inquire, please, of bygone ages, and consider what the fathers have searched out. For we are but of yesterday and know nothing. For our days on earth are a shadow. Will they not teach you and tell you and utter words out of their understanding? Can papyrus grow when there is no marsh? Can reeds flourish where there is no water? Yet while in flower and not cut down, they wither before any other plant. Such are the paths of all who forget God. The hope of the godless shall perish. His confidence is severed, and his trust is a spider's web. He leans against his house, but it does not stand. He lays hold of it, but it does not endure. He is a lush plant before the sun, and his shoots spread over his garden. His roots entwine the stone heap. He looks upon the house of stones. If he is destroyed from his place, then it will deny him, saying, I have never seen you. Behold, this is the joy of his way, and out of the soil others will spring. Behold, God will not reject a blameless man, nor take the hand of evildoers. He will yet fill your mouth with laughter and your lips with shouting. Those who hate you will be clothed with shame, and the tent of the wicked will be no more. It's interesting to read Bildad. He's compared to Eliphaz, he speaks a lot shorter. Compared to Job, he's speaking a lot less as well. So he kind of knows what he wants to say. He's fairly straightforward, but it's interesting, like how right he is about things, and then totally oblivious about, and about the, I don't know.
Yeah, like the reason I say he's the prosperity gospel guy is because he says, if you were pure and upright, surely now he would wake up for you and make the habitation of your righteousness prosperous. Even though your beginning was small, your latter days should greatly increase, right? And then he goes into something about the fathers, like the ancestors and the wisdom of the ancestors. And, but then he says, the paths of all that forget God, and the godless man's hope shall perish, whose hope shall be cut off, and whose trust shall be a spider's web. He shall lean upon his house, but it shall not stand. He shall hold it fast, and it shall not endure. And then he goes on, he's green before the sun, and his branch shoots forth in his garden. His roots are wrapped about the heap and see the place of the stones. So basically he's saying that the wicked will not prosper, and only the righteous are prosperous. That's how he sees the world, right?
Yep.
Then in chapter 9, I have to jump ahead because it's so perfect. Job says, though I were perfect. Oh no, here it is. This is the one thing, therefore I said it. He destroys the perfect and the wicked. Right? The earth is given into the hand of the wicked. He covers the faces of the judges. And he talks about the prosperity of the wicked to this guy who just told him that the wicked don't prosper.
Yeah. Right.
And so he's saying this, you haven't even thought this through. Like, yeah, say that, like, just look around. There's all kinds of prosperous, wicked people out there. Right. And, this guy's just, he's got, I think his thing is so short and sweet because he really doesn't have he has a very narrow view of
everything's very black and white. He's the type of person that says that's how it is, that's how it is, and thinks he's being helpful all the time.
There's no nuance at all. He doesn't even consider the fact. He doesn't even look around. He doesn't even what? Look around. No. Right? He's totally cocooned in his world of, be righteous, be prosperous, be wicked, be destroyed. That's his thing, And so for him, what's happening to Job is obvious. Yeah, it's just so obvious. It's just obvious. Right? Yep. Yeah, whereas Eliphaz was a little bit more, let me offer you some advice.
Let me tell you about this mystical vision that I had. Let's talk about the relationship between God and man kind of thing. And let's look at the big picture, and then let's see how this works out through our tradition. Bildad is just sort of like, this is how it is. This is, plants do this, and they wither. And
yeah.
Yeah. But I think it's funny because in verse 7, he's like, even though your beginning was small, your latter days will be very great. Like, this ends up being the case. Like, he ends up greater than he was. And then at the very end, when he says in 20, 21, and 22, he says, behold, God will not reject a blameless man or take the hand of evildoers. He will yet fill your mouth with laughter and your lips with shouting. Those who hate you will be clothed with shame, and the tent of the wicked will be no more. And he doesn't realize how right he is, but he doesn't think for a second that Job is actually blameless right now, and that he's being the evildoer, and he's going to be the one that's
clothed with shame
in the end. Like he's ironically correct about stuff,
but
which is funny.
He does have the caveat, though, that in verse 6 he says, or 5 and 6, if you would seek unto God and make your supplication to him, if you were pure and upright, and then he says, then your beginning, which would be small, would increase, and then you would have laughter on your lips, right, and rejoice, and then all those, right? So it's like, if you just did this thing, right, then and it's such a superficial, in my opinion, hopefully I don't insult anyone by saying this, but it's such a superficial and self-defeating way to live, because we all know that there are calamities, whether it's even just walking to the sink with your dishes and dropping your wine glass and smashing it, that are not your fault, right? Like, it just
they have no distinction between, like, if I go out and I commit adultery and my family falls apart, and then I become an alcoholic, or I get addicted to substances, and then my life sort of cascades, you could at least say, like, well, it's because you cheated on your wife, and then you started doing drugs. Like, you could at least, like, there's some causality to my actions, to the bad things that happen. But
there is.
But what they're doing is they're just seeing the calamity and then inferring the sin. And they're not making a distinction that those things could actually be possible. Like, people could suffer stuff that it's not their fault, and they're not to blame. And it's, and that whole idea of, if you seek God, that's another echo of what Eliphaz said. He's like, seek, if I were you, I would seek God. And this is what Bildad's saying, is seek God. And we kind of hear that. You're like, take it to God. Someone's suffering. Like, go to God with it. God will help you. And it's also kind
the
of
modern
like,
version of that is trust the Lord. Just trust the Lord.
Yeah. And then like, if you have enough faith, then like, I don't know how many times I've heard that in my life is like, if you have enough faith, and then if it didn't happen, then, well, you didn't have enough faith.
Exactly. It's completely, what's that scientific term? Non-falsifiable. Like, you can't prove that statement, right? And all it's meant to do is make you feel like a piece of crap. Really. Well, I don't know if it's meant to do that, but that's its end effect, right? Is it makes you feel like you couldn't work it up, right? You couldn't make it happen. But I think this is the whole point of Job. Like, you can't make anything happen. Like, this is what Job is saying. Yeah. That's why Job says right here, therefore, I will not refrain my mouth. I will speak in the anguish of my spirit. I will complain in the bitterness of my soul, right? For that very reason, because I don't have control over this, right? If I had control over it, I could do something about it, right? If it was mine, and I had possession of it, and it was a problem that I had to solve. I could solve it, but I can't. I don't know what's going on. I haven't done anything wrong. And so I'm going to complain.
Mm-hmm.
I'm taking this to the manager.
Yeah. To the Supreme Court.
I want to speak to your supervisor.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That's really what he's saying. And they're just like, no.
Yeah. I do want to mention this verse 3 and 4. He says, Bildad says, does God pervert justice, or does the Almighty pervert the right? Mm-hmm. If your children have sinned against him, he has delivered them into the hand of their transgression. And so this is that point of him just being like, it's simple what happened. Yep. Your kids sinned and they're dead. They committed a sin bad enough for God to wipe them out. Brutal. Like now, and this is the same friend that came to comfort him. And
this is the same friend who knew that Job was constantly consecrating his children.
Yeah. And there he's assuming a sin happened. And
that Job wasn't able to, right? That Job somehow missed something. Mm-hmm. So it's still his fault.
Yep. Yeah, and Christians will tie themselves in knots when something bad happens to them. Their kid gets sick. There's a death. There's, something terminal. Like they're like, what did I do? What did I do? What did I? These things happen, and people will even be like, maybe you need to pray away something. Maybe someone cursed you, or maybe, there's a spirit of sickness that came upon you, or I don't know, whatever. Like I've heard all these things. It's who knows? Like, but like, I appreciate Job's confidence in saying, like, if it's the case, show me how. Otherwise, I'm innocent. That sort of attitude among.
Well, he's totally willing to take responsibility, right? He's like, he's got this old system in the back of his mind, and he's like, meh. But if, okay, I'll take responsibility. But right now, I've run through all my files here, and I'm not finding anything. Yeah.
Well, I was going to bring that up in the previous chapter, because he says, like, I'm like a caravan that's turned aside looking for an oasis, and you haven't provided it. And it's only been after Eliphaz spoke. So his only one friend has spoken, and he's like, you guys don't have anything to offer. He's already run through all the arguments that they've said in his mind. He's waiting for them to provide something new. Yeah. And he basically is, I don't know, I kind of see that as him saying, like, you guys have nothing because I see that you're afraid. And so it doesn't matter that Bildad hadn't spoken yet, or Zophar. He's like, I already know what you're going to say.
Yeah. And this kind of gets into that expectation thing that we talked about yesterday: expectation, perception, belief, and facts. Job's perception is affected by his expectations. That's kind of what you're saying, right? He knows the system that they're caught up in. So he has an expectation as to what they're going to say next. And that is how he perceives them, right? Because of those expectations. And they don't really disappoint him in any way, right? They don't disappoint. No.
Yeah. And it's such a textbook example of how someone can come with the best intentions as a friend and then start actually abusing the person they initially went to help, because they have some sort of ideology or framework or structure that they've got to protect, because they don't want to let that go, because then they're going to be in a
Yeah. Yep. Should we read Job's response?
Yeah, let's do it. All right. Then Job answered and said, truly, I know that it is so, but how can a man be? Truly, I know that it is so, but how can a man be in the right before God? If one wishes to contend with him, one could not answer him once in 1,000 times. He is wise in heart and mighty in strength, who has hardened himself against him and succeeded. He who removes mountains, and they know it not, when he overturns them in his anger, who shakes the earth out of its place and the pillars tremble, who commands the sun and it does not rise, who seals up the stars, who alone stretched out the heavens and trampled the waves of the sea, who made the Bear and Orion and Pleiades and the chambers of the south, who does great things beyond searching out and marvelous things beyond number. Behold, he passes by me, and I see him not. He moves on, but I do not perceive him. Behold, he snatches away. Who can turn him back? Who will say to him, what are you doing? God will not turn back his anger. Beneath him bowed the helpers of Rahab. How then can I answer him, choosing my words with him? Though I am in the right, I cannot answer him. I must appeal for mercy to my accuser. If I summoned him and he answered me, I would not believe that he was listening to my voice. For he crushes me with a tempest and multiplies my wounds without cause. He will not let me get my breath, but fills me with bitterness. If it is a contest of strength, behold, he is mighty. If it is a matter of justice, who can summon him? Though I am in the right, my own mouth would condemn me. Though I am blameless, he would prove me perverse. I am blameless. I regard not myself. I loathe my life. It is all one, therefore I say. He destroys both the blameless and the wicked. When disaster brings sudden death, he mocks at the calamity of the innocent. The earth is given into the hand of the wicked, and he covers the faces of its judges. If it is not he, then who is it? My days are swifter than a runner. They flee away. Man, I'm getting choked up reading this.
You can read some more if you want.
No, I got it.
Okay.
My days are swifter than a runner. They flee away. They see no good. They go by like skips of reed, like an eagle swooping on the prey. If I say I will forget my complaint, and I will put off my sad face and be of good cheer, I become afraid of all my suffering, for I know you will not hold me innocent. I shall be condemned. Why then do I labor in vain? If I wash myself with snow and cleanse my hands with lye, yet you will plunge me into a pit, and my own clothes will abhor me. For he is not a man as I am, that I might answer him, that we should come to trial together. There is no arbiter between us who might lay his hand on us both. Let him take his rod away from me, and let not dread of him terrify me. Then I would speak without fear of him, for I am not so in myself. I loathe my life. I will give free utterance to my complaint. I will speak in the bitterness of my soul. I will say to God, do not condemn me. Let me know why you contend against me. Does it seem good to you to oppress, to despise the work of your hands, and favor the designs of the wicked? Have you eyes of flesh? Do you see as man sees? Are your days as the days of man, or your years as man's years, that you seek out my iniquity and search for my sin? Although you know that I am not guilty, and there is none to deliver out of your hand. Your hands fashioned me and made me, and now you have destroyed me altogether. Remember that you have made me like clay, and you will return me to the dust. Did you not pour me out like milk and curdle me like cheese? You clothed me with skin and flesh, and knit me together with bones and sinews. You have granted me life and steadfast love, and your care has preserved my spirit. Yet these things you hid in your heart. I know that this was your purpose. If I sin, you watch me, and you do not acquit me of my iniquity. If I am guilty, woe to me. If I am in the right, I cannot lift my head, for I am filled with disgrace. I look on my affliction. And were my head lifted up, you would hunt me like a lion, and you would work wonders against me. You renew your witness against me and increase your vexation toward me. You bring fresh troops against me. Why did you bring me out of the womb? Would that I had died before any eye had seen me, and were as though I had not been, carried from the womb to the grave. Are not my days few? Then cease and leave me alone, that I may find a little cheer before I go, and I shall not return to the land. That I may go. Let me start up. Then cease and leave me alone, that I may find a little cheer before I go, and shall not return to the land of darkness and deep shadow, to the land of gloom like thick darkness, like deep shadow without any order, where light is as thick darkness.
Mhm.
Man, it's heavy stuff.
I love it.
Oh, I love it too. It's so
I just love it. I just love Job. You know,
it has echoes of that chapter 3, but it's like even
well, it's deepening, right? Like
it is.
you were saying, it's like an evolution of consciousness, basically, right? This moving around the round pen, trying to find the ground, some ground to stand on, really.
Yep.
And as that horse whirls around that round pen, his mind is going tick, 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 constantly. He's looking for the same things Job is looking for, actually. He's looking for comfort because he's terrified, and he's looking for rest because he doesn't want to keep running, right? And when you stop the horse in the round pen, then you're giving it to him. You're giving him comfort and rest at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the first lessons they learn in the round pen, is because the first time you try to stop a green horse, they don't stop, right? Because they're trying to get away from you.
They just keep going.
Yeah, like you raise your hand to stop them, and they'll scoot past you, and because they're in a form of rebellion against you, right? It's not, you don't have that relationship, but once you get them stopped for the first time, and sometimes that means just like putting yourself right in their path, right? They go, cling. This little light comes on. Oh, I'm not running. I'm resting, right? And she's not chasing me. She's not, because when you're working in the round pen, you're actually putting a pressure on the horse psychologically, and you let that off, right? So there's no pressure at all. You kind of look to the ground and just relax your body. And so everybody's resting, right? Horse and you. And that first lesson is exactly that one, that when she says to stop, I get to rest and I get comfort, right?
Mm-hmm.
In that, because I'm not afraid anymore. So then the next time you raise your arm and send the horse around the pen, all you have to do is just indicate you're going to stop them, and they'll stop immediately, because that's really what they want more than anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the whole thing is it's, their feet are moving, but their heads are thinking the whole time, right? They're trying to figure this out, Like this is actually kind of a good example of Job. I had this, I was in a horse training clinic, and the first thing we had to do was we had to find a partner, another person, and one of us was the horse.
Oh.
And the other one was the trainer. And they tied like a little rope around your wrist, right? And the trainer was only allowed to cue you as to what they wanted. So they would get an idea that maybe they wanted you to kneel, okay? But they could only tell you to kneel by doing tension and release. on the rope. Tension means you're not doing the right thing. Release means that's the right thing. And so you get into this, you have this moment with another human being where nobody's talking and all you have is a rope and they're pulling on it. And so you're moving around trying to figure out what they want, and they just keep pulling harder, right? And you're trying all this stuff. And that the whole exercise was to show what the horse is going through when you're training it, because it's not any different than you are, really, right? And how much of the work is going of the horse is going on in its head, right? Because it's thinking. And so this is like similar to, there's a similarity to Job here, because Job's having all this pressure put on him, right? And so his mind is thinking, and the pressure isn't letting off. And he's not getting any rest. He's not getting any comfort. And it's forcing him to explore things that he's never done before. He's never had to think about those things before, right? But he's so desperate to figure out how to get rid of this pressure, right?
Right.
That he's going to try everything. He's going to go to every place, right? So I think in this part of the story with this conversation with the friends, and like you said, there's evolution of consciousness, is that exploration, right?
Oh, yeah.
That thinking.
Yeah. And
the first place, what I wanted to say was the first place he goes is he goes into his known tradition, right? He goes into the farthest reaches of that known tradition, and he what's the word? He tosses it out. He just says, that's not it, because I've fulfilled all that stuff. I've done all that stuff, and here I still am, right?
Yep.
And that's why I think he can say to his friends, you don't have anything to offer me, right?
Yep.
And I'm going to complain. I'm going to just speak from the bitterness of my soul.
That's almost like using the example of like Job's like figuring out, what do I need to do to release the pressure? Like the first thing he realizes that he needs to do is he needs to speak.
Yeah.
And it's that, lament in chapter. It's what?
It's not the kind of speech his friends approve of.
No, and it's not the kind he's used to doing.
Yeah, because he's already exhausted. That's the word I'm looking for. He's already exhausted the old system, right?
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
Well, and even there is like in chapters 1 and 2, there everything sort of talks about the completeness of Job. He is complete. He's done. He's finished. He not finished, but everything's kind of reached a pinnacle in all in all these areas, and this is something new happening,
right?
Remember
when we talked about baselines with horses? So the horse's baseline is because it's a prey animal, it runs, right? So it gets this shot of adrenaline and gone. That's how it preserves itself, right? And so when you're in the round pen, you're actually working off their baseline, right?
Is human baseline to complain?
Well, no, Job's baseline.
Or to cry.
Job's baseline is his wisdom tradition. Okay. So he's already been around the round pen of the wisdom tradition several times, and he never got any comfort or peace or rest there.
Right.
He's gone to the darkest recesses of his tradition, and it's not giving him any answers.
So now he's going to places where he hasn't explored before.
He has to think about other things. And it's like the horse. The horse's baseline is to run, but that running is just not getting them anywhere, is it? They're going in circles. That's what they're doing. And I'm
Yeah.
still in the round pen with them. I'm still a threat. I'm still putting pressure on them. So
Mhm.
now that they, so in order for them to make that jump, like Pajot talks about, that next level, right? They have to come to the end of their own baseline, right? Which they have to realize that running isn't going to get me out of here. Now I have to think of something else, right? Just like Job, where his wisdom tradition doesn't get him out of this situation. Right.
Yep.
So now he has to think of other things. And that's why, like you said, he speaks, right? Because Peterson talks about this. Speaking is thinking.
Yeah. And it's not, it may seem that he's repeating himself, but he's actually making progress. And to kind of cut to the chase here in verse 33. Let's start with 32. For he is not a man as I am, that I may answer him, and that we should come to trial together. There is no arbiter between us who might lay his hand on us both. And this is this first mention of this idea of having an arbiter, like someone that's going to mediate between the two. So all of a sudden he has this idea of, his Eliphaz said, seek God. Bildad said, seek God. And he's like, and then he puts together, he's like, if I had a problem with another man, we would go to trial. We would meet together, and there would be another wise man that would be able to arbitrate between us, so this doesn't turn into a giant disaster.
Yeah.
So he's like, as long as I'm alive, I'm going to speak. And if I'm going to speak, we got to figure this out. And if we're going to figure it out, how am I supposed to, a lot of this is he's talking about how
he's never had that close of a relationship. Is that what you're trying to get at?
Well, I
think.
Let me see if I can. In verse 19, it says, if it's a contest of strength, behold, he is mighty. If it's a matter of justice, who can summon him? So this is like, who can call him to account? Even though I am in the right, my own mouth would condemn me. He's like, even if I am right, I'm going to say something wrong. And even if I am blameless, he would prove me perverse. So he's almost saying, like, I can't compare to God.
Right.
And so if it's an argument, but if it's about strength, he wins. If it's an argument about justice, he wins. If it's even my own, what I'm saying, I'm going to say something wrong. I'm going to mess up somewhere.
I'm not perfect. And God is kind of what he's getting at, right?
Yeah. And so this is, you can see how he's like, he's building up an idea of how he can approach God in this, which gets built upon this idea. Like it almost sorts of take on aspects of Job's speech, start to take on this sort of court case scenario. And, the arbiter, it's interesting how this happens too, because the verse about the arbiter is in chapter 9 and 10, the verse about the arbiter is like right in the middle. And this is something
that's interesting.
That's always interesting to notice, that there's sort of like this whole thing, and then what does it center around? And it's just one little sentence. You'd be like, it doesn't, what about all the other sentences? Well, it has a place. And so it's almost like Job gets on this roll, going back into, he's shaking the earth out of its place and its pillars. And it's interesting how he's still in this same thing of chapter 3, is it's this sort of undoing of creation. So he's like, he who removes the mountain, who overturns them, who shakes the earth and the pillars tremble. And then like, who commands the sun not to rise. He says, who commands the sun and it does not rise, and who seals up the stars. So it's almost like an undoing of everything. He's like, if God undoes everything, who can stop it? And so he's talking, obviously he's talking about his own experience of kind of going through this destruction. And then, he's starting to talk more about creation, which is interesting because that's what God's whole speech is about eventually. So even though he's talking about the unmaking of everything, he's still hitting on something about creation that's happening. It's almost like something intuitive, but he's on the back side of it, something like that.
Well, I thought it was interesting because after I always forget these people's names. Bildad finishes his speech. Job says, I know it is so of a truth. Okay. So that's what he says to Bildad. I know that you're onto something there. Like, I know that there's a truth in there. Okay. I know that. But then he says, but how should a man be just with God? So in a sense, what he's saying is this law of retribution that you're hanging on to, which is your answer to everything. Okay. It doesn't really hold up, because if Bildad had to answer, how should a man be just with God? And then of course, then Job goes into, like you were just talking about, right? Like he's bigger than me, he's stronger than me. If I there's no contest between me and God, right? And so it's almost like he's saying to Bildad, you really think your system's working? Right? You really think you got God in your pocket?
Yeah.
Because how is that even possible? There's no contest here. Okay. If he wants to turn the world upside down, if he wants to shut up the stars, if he wants to stop the sun from coming up, not a problem. Right? You're just lucky he hasn't done it to you. Like me, Yeah. Right?
Yep.
And then there's this. So I get the sense that Job is realizing that there's this tension. He's realizing that I don't really control God. We don't really control God. God is not controllable. Because really there's no contest between man. I'm a man, right? Like that's what he says. If I do anything, God's greater than that. There's nothing I can do, is what Job is saying, And then in verse 32, he says, for he is not a man as I am, that I should answer him, and we should come together in judgment. What I think is really interesting is verse 34. Let him take his rod away from me, and let not his fear terrify me. Then would I speak and not fear him. But it is not so with me. So he senses that at this point, his fear is coming between him and God, right? And I don't know what you think of this, but that's
interesting.
That seems to be what all his friends base everything on. They're afraid of God, right? So it's this placation of God constantly with the ritual of their tradition, right? And Job's just like, oh man, I just got to get rid of this, fear, because I want to talk to you about this stuff, right?
Yep.
We need to talk. That's what he's saying. And I don't know, I really love that, because he's just so honest. Job is just so honest, right?
Yeah. Well, isn't that the case when something terrible happens? You're like, God, I can't even talk to you.
Yeah.
Like, and then you're like, now I feel bad because this thing has come between us. But what am I supposed to do about that? This has come between us now. That fear that has now sort of.
Well, it's interesting because I did have a personal experience with that when I tried to commit suicide. Right, I was afraid because at the time I didn't know. I thought maybe the Catholics are right. If I kill myself, I go to hell. Like I had no idea, right? And I was afraid, but I also couldn't stop doing what I was doing. And it's kind of like Job, in the situation. He's afraid, but he can't stop saying what he's saying. He can't stop thinking about what he's thinking about. And I remember thinking that, and then saying to God, I'm sorry if this is not your will for me to go to hell, and I'm going to go to hell. That's what I was thinking about.
Right.
I'm sorry about that, but I can't, there's no way out for me. And as soon as I spoke to God, he spoke to me. And he said to me, it's okay. I know how you feel. That's what he said.
Wow.
Right. And he said, I had plans to prosper you. That's what he wanted for me. Right. And I was comforted as I was departing. Okay. Like, you're right. I felt like I was in the arms of God. And so what I'm getting at with all that is that I was afraid. I was afraid of God's judgment on me. Some unrelenting kind of, sorry, but yeah, I see all that, but you did this and that's it. There's just no going back.
Yeah.
It was nice knowing you. And you gave it a good try. Right?
Right.
I was afraid of that God. And then the real God showed up. Right. And then we had a conversation. Right. Then we could talk because I didn't have the fear between. I was like, when he said, it's okay, I know how you feel. I was like, what? You do? And then I wanted to talk. Right. Then we could talk.
Well, Job talks about this in 10:4. He says, have you eyes of flesh? Do you see as a man sees?
Yeah.
So he's, are your days of the days of man and your year? He's like, have you seen things from my perspective?
Yeah. Do you know what it's like to be me?
Do you know what it's like?
Yeah. And that's what I felt like, that I was fully prepared to go for the eternal hellfire. Right. I was fully prepared. And I thought that that's what would happen to me. And, but I said, you just don't know what it's like to be me. And then God essentially said, yeah, I do. Right?
Right.
Because he suffered and died, right? He suffered.
Yep.
Right. So, I mean, that never came up in the conversation, but, it's obvious.
Yeah. And that part comes right after he mentions the arbiter. So he's like, we have to have, like Job's like, we have to have someone that sees things from man's perspective. Because even in, at the beginning of 7, where he says, has not man a hard service on earth, and are not his days like the days of a hired hand? He's like, he's almost sort of taking on, he's like, he's growing in his, I don't know if it's sympathy for humanity.
Job?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Like all through that chapter 10 there, when he talks about all that, like your hands have made me, and, you put the skin on me, and the skin and the flesh and the bones, right? Then he says, Thou hast granted me life with favor, and thy visitation has preserved my spirit. And these things have you hid in your heart. I know this is with you. So it's like Job starting to see some kind of purpose in humanity. I don't know.
Well, I think in chapter or in verse 13, he says, yet these things you hid in your heart. I know that this was your purpose, which is the suffering that he's going through right now. So he's like, you cared for me, you knit me together, you preserved my soul. But now I know that there were these things in your heart as well, which is what's happening right now. And then he says, right after that, he's like, if I sin, you watch me and you do not acquit me of my iniquity. If I am guilty, woe to me. And if I am the right, I cannot lift my head. So he's seen, I mean, he's witnessing the other side of life, basically. And he's like, this is part of life too. This is part of.
Yeah. And I get a sense too that he's kind of begging God for compassion.
Yeah.
You know, on him, on humanity, right? On the frailty of his creature.
Yeah, that whole idea of do you see as a man sees? It reminds me of a conversation that Paul Vanderklay had with I don't remember his name, but he was a Finnish guy from Finland, and his family is native to Finland, and they were pagan before Christianity came to Finland. And he talks about how he said, like, if you go out into the woods, you know, you would reach an open space, and that open space would signify like the boundary of some sort of someone rules that area. Who rules it? And so there would be like something like a rock that would look like a face, or he mentioned like a tree that stood up and looked like a pike, like a fish, the predatory fish. And he's like, if that whoever ruled that area saw through the eye of the pike, he doesn't know about your experience, doesn't know about you. And that's frightening to have, you know, it'd be like in the woods, and then you notice there's a tiger staring at you, and you look at those eyes looking at you, and you know that there's something else looking at you. It's not another man.
Something completely other.
Right. And and so and he said that, like, he talks about how when Christianity came, it was like, no, God has the eyes of man, you know, through Christ. And so this is this idea of like, does God know what it's like? And even, you know, for me, this is more of Job seeing the importance of, we got to have someone that understands all this. He's like, I've seen the good side of things, and how you knit me together, you clothed me with skin and flesh, and granted me my life and steadfast love. But this was also hidden in your heart towards me, which is all this that's happening. And it's like, someone's got to know about this so that we can have, you know, so that this situation can be remedied, because this is not tenable.
Like he says here, if I be wicked, in verse 15, if I be wicked, woe unto me. And if I be righteous, yet will I not lift up my head. I'm full of confusion. Therefore, see thou mine affliction, for it increases. You know.
And there's that hunting metaphor right after that. You hunt me like a lion,
right,
and work wonders against me. So Job, like, God's pushing Job. Job's on the move. And
excuse me,
as this stuff is coming out of Job, like you got to think that this is are you dying? You got to think that this is what God saw, or this is the process. It's like this is the process of creation. You think of like someone giving birth, and they have their birth plan of how they want everything to go, and you want everything to kind of go along, and then all of a sudden there's something unexpected happens, and you got to be rushed into do a C-section, or everything's messy. Everything's like, and
well, this is the throwing wrenches metaphor that I like, right? Where God just, as soon as the system is in place, God just throws a wrench into it, right? Because he's like, no,
everything's completed.
Well, you don't have me figured out.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what Job is saying here. I'm totally confused. I don't. It's that tension of good and evil. Like, and Job makes it very clear. From the first chapter till now, that God is in control of all of these things. Like God doesn't have like a nemesis, an evil twin, okay, in Job's world.
No. Like
Christianity does.
Yeah, he's not complaining to the devil. Why did you do this to me, devil?
And he's not wrong either. And this is the hard part about Job, right? And it's what Job is talking about when he says, I'm full of confusion. How is this possible that you had these things hidden in your heart, right? Yeah.
I do want to mention just a couple things that are interesting. So Job, again, like in all three times he's spoken now, he mentions the sea serpent. So at first he's talking about rousing Leviathan to uncreate him. Then in 6 or 7, he says, am I a sea serpent that he's like, am I the sea serpent that you're like putting a guard over me? And then this one, he says, it's not a super clear because it's in the context or whatever. But in verse 13 of chapter 9, he says, God will not turn back his anger. Beneath him bowed the helpers of Rahab. And Rahab there is talking about the sea monsters. Rahab is also a name that was used for Egypt in other places. So like post Exodus, it's used that way, but it's also but I think the name actually it's a chaotic monster. So that's just interesting that there's like these things that keep coming up. So the creation, uncreation stuff, the sea serpent, then now we have this arbitrary idea. It was another one I was going to, it's and then he's talking about the womb. Like in 10:18, he says, why did you bring me out from the womb? Would that I had died before an eye had seen me. Man, if we, like, you can go in, and I've done this a little bit. It's so time consuming, but you can do word comparisons of how words are used throughout Job. And sometimes they're only used like twice. And like one's in God's speech and one's over here. And then they have like exactly the flipped meaning in each context, which is super interesting. But but there's so many things that are woven so tightly through the book that we're not even able to get to.
No.
Just and because we can't read it in Hebrew in kind of the original language, there's stuff that's mixed that we kind of miss.
Totally.
But yeah, I just want to point that out.
Yeah, there's a lot that we miss, I'm sure.
Okay, you got time to do chapter 11, and then
Sure. Yeah.
then we'll finish up. All right. Then Zophar, so this is the third friend, Zophar the Naamathite answered and said, should a multitude of words go unanswered and a man full of talk be judged right? Should your babble silence men, and when you mock, shall no one shame you? For you say, my doctrine is pure, and I am clean in God's eyes. But oh, that God would speak and open his lips to you, and that he would tell you the secrets of wisdom. For he is manifold in understanding. Know then that God exacts of you less than your guilt deserves. These guys, man.
Yeah.
Can you find out the deep things of God? Can you find out the limit of the Almighty? It is higher than heaven. What can you do? Deeper than Sheol. What can you know? Its measure is longer than the earth and broader than the sea. If he passes through and imprisons and summons the court, who can turn him back? For he knows worthless men. When he sees iniquity, will he not consider it? But a stupid man will not get understanding when a wild donkey's colt is born a man. He's so like Zophar is angry. He's pissed off. If you prepare your heart, you will stretch out your hands towards him. If iniquity is in your hand, put it far away, and let not injustice dwell in your tents. Surely then you will lift up your face without blemish. You will be secure and will not fear. You will forget your misery. You will remember it as the waters have passed away, and your life will be brighter than the noonday. Its darkness will be like the morning. And you will feel secure because there is hope. And you will look around and take your rest in security. You will lie down, and none will make you afraid. Many will court your favor, but the eyes of the wicked will fail. All way of escape will be lost to them, and their hope is to breathe their last.
I just want to read Job's answer now because it's so good. Let's
see, it's 12, 13, 14.
No, we don't have to.
Yeah, we're going to have to wait. It's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot. But I just have to read the first verse.
Okay.
No doubt, you are the people, and wisdom will die with you.
It's one of the best one-liners. He's just like, you guys.
Okay.
No doubt you are the people, and wisdom will die. So let's see what Zophar is saying. So basically he's saying, should a multitude of words go unanswered and a man full of talk be judged right? Should your babble silence men, and when you mock, shall no one shame you?
Again, he's having problems with the verbosity of Job, right? Like he's just like, quit talking, especially.
Yeah, and it's like they can't see what we were talking about, how there's this progression happening throughout the three things that Job said. He's just like, and it seems like the only thing that he's concerned about is what corresponds to his doctrine, which is that, he's seeing, whereas like Bildad was kind of like seeing things black and white. Zophar's just mad at him for doing any of this. He has no patience for what Job's going about this.
There's I'll put a little note for verse 13. If you prepare your heart and stretch out your hands towards him. He's talking about an orientation, right? So he's saying, if you would just do that, if you just orient yourself to God, to Job. Meanwhile, in my opinion, nobody could be more oriented to God than Job, right? Job's just finished saying, we need to have a conversation, right? If I could just get rid of this fear that I have, right? So that you and I could have a talk, right? Because I'm confused. Like, if I'm bad things happen. If I'm good things, bad things happen. Right? So like, we need to talk about this. And then this guy's like, oh man, if you could just orient yourself to God.
Right. Yeah, he totally misses what Job's doing.
He has no insight at all.
And you could argue that Job is preparing his heart.
Of course,
it's this whole messy, disastrous process. And that's literally what's happening. And he's saying, what you need to do is prepare your heart. You're like, don't you see what's going on so far? Don't you?
All he's got left is his heart.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's broken. And he wants mercy from God, right? Like he wants healing, right? And, actually, I shouldn't say that. Job doesn't really want it. He's not asking for any restoration, actually. He never seems to ask for that. He just wants an answer.
Yeah, that's really interesting. He doesn't ask for anything. He just wants an answer.
And his friends are all about restoration, right? If you just did this, then everything will come back.
Oh, yeah.
You'll be all restored and we can have our...
That's interesting. Like his friends are talking about restoration and Job's just like, just give me an answer and crush me.
Because he spent his whole life doing the things. Okay. Like, just think about it. He was dedicated to God. His children were dedicated to God. His businesses were dedicated to God. Everything was God's. It was a gift, right? That's how he sees God. And then he took it seriously. And then all of a sudden it was all, and it wasn't just like replaced with something else, or he didn't have a little lesson in humility where some of the things were taken away. But he was like hunted. He was hunted. He could feel the watcher, right?
Well, that's probably the experience the horse feels when it's first in the, it's like, I'm being hunted. This person's going to kill me. I got to keep moving.
Right.
Yeah.
And you think about it, like our eyes are on the front of our faces, which is where predators have their eyes, right? And our eyes also have whites. All the other animals don't have whites. So you can't see where they're looking. I can't tell where my horse is looking. Usually I can get a better idea of where they're looking by where their ears are pointed.
Right.
Than their eyes, because they don't have whites. We have whites, and so do predators, actually. And when they're looking at something, you know what they're looking at. Right? So the horse is in the round pen, and I'm looking at it with my predator eyes.
Right. Well, and you said when you give it rest, you look down, you look away.
Yeah. You have to take that pressure off, and the pressure comes right from your eyes, actually.
Wow.
Yeah. And so, like Joni Mitchell's song, oh, you tireless watcher, what have I done to you? Right? Because you can feel it. It's like that tiger in the brush, right? Staring at you. You're like, oh man, what have I done to you? Like, just leave me alone, right? You're going to get me. And it's not because you don't like me. Like, this is what Job was struggling with, right? It's because you're a tiger. And that's what tigers do. And he's coming to this conclusion about God. Like, It's like, you did all this for me, right? But you had these things hidden in your heart. He's starting to see that God is like the tiger.
Is God a tiger? Is God a lion?
A lion, right?
Mhm.
And this is actually, I'm just thinking right now of Blake's poem. I'm going to look it up really quick because I don't know if it suits, but I think it does actually. Blake wrote a poem called Tiger.
Oh yeah. William Blake also illustrated that book of Job. He wanted to he did a couple books like that where he just wanted to do the entire books with illustrations. And he's got some written words and stuff, but those illustrations about the book of Job are famous.
Okay, I got the poem.
Okay.
It's in this, like, if you think about it in this light, tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forests of the night, what immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry? In what distant deeps or skies burnt the fire of thine eyes? On what wings dare he aspire? What the hand dare seize the fire? And what shoulder and what art could twist the sinews of thy heart? And when thy heart began to beat, what dread hand and what dread feet? What the hammer, what the chain, in what furnace was thy brain? What the anvil, what dread grasp dare its deadly terrors clasp? When the stars threw down their spears and watered heaven with their tears, did he smile his work to see? Did he who made the lamb make thee? Tiger burning bright in the forests of the night, what immortal hand or eye dare frame thy fearful symmetry, right? Like that last line, what immortal hand or eye dare frame? Like, who dares to build you, right? And God did. That's what he says, right? Yeah. Did he who make the lamb make you? Yeah. And this is what Job is finding out, right? This is why Job says, you had these things hidden in your heart, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, it's I goosebumps just reading that, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a sense in which Job has been shown things that his friends have never considered.
No.
And Job is seeing things now that are, I think we talked about this, but the hedge of protection that was around him was kind of like a womb. And he's been born out into this larger world. And, what does a baby do when it first comes out? It just cries.
Yeah.
And then it's got to figure out what is going on and like how to, because, you can kind of get that even from like Job being complete. Like when the baby is complete, finished in the womb, it's time to be born. And so there's a sense in which Job in his completeness was God's been waiting for this. He's like, all right, time for stage 2, right, or whatever.
And like I was saying in that conversation yesterday with Ken and Luke, the body, the baby is born when it runs out of space, when it's filled up all the corners of its hedged in protection, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then God is like, hey, Satan, have you considered him?
Yeah.
And Satan's like, we got to take away the hedge. And God's like, sounds like a great idea. You want to it took me a while to see that, but there's such a way in which God is just playing Satan. Satan is a second, we think that Satan is as the accuser is some sort of major character that's like instigating all this, and God's instigating everything. He's like, he knows what Satan wants to do and how he wants to accuse and how he wants to
kind of like a couple of old, might sound very irreverent. But it's kind of like a couple of old guys. You know, one guy's a Chevy man, and the other guy's a Ford man, right?
Yeah. Just knows what buttons to push.
But no, it's like, you know, God's the Chevy man, right? Satan's the Ford guy, and God's like, no, the Chevy is better, right?
Right.
The Chevy will. I know that the Chevy will outdo the Ford, right? And Satan's like, let me give it a run around the block.
Right.
I'm gonna put it through its paces, right?
Yeah.
Like I really like that dream from Eliphaz, you know, when he says, well, you know, he has the spirit has a disdain for humanity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because God is so great, and he's so powerful, and he's so strong, and he's so, you know, he's everything. And this human being is just such a insect, you know, and it's like Satan just can't get over his disgust. He just can't get over it. And he keeps having the same argument with God. Well, yeah, but you know, he just did this, I'm sure. But God's strength is made perfect in weakness. So it has to be the most vulnerable, the weakest. And this is what Job is saying. I am so weak, right? Like, you know, you don't know what it's like to be me.
Mm-hmm.
I can't even, there's no contest between you and me. That's what he's saying there, right? And this is where his confusion lies. Like, why are you hunting me like this? Because you know, you put me together, you know? And but God's strength is made perfect in weakness, and we'll see that play out, you know, in the book, I think. And and that's what Job needs to come to terms with.
Yeah.
That's what we all need to come to terms with, actually.
Yeah. And, you know, I think there's, you know, people like to say God, it's almost cliche the way people use it, but God's ways are higher than our ways. And that's what like in that sense, what you're talking about is how it's meant.
Well, you know, God's strength made perfect in weakness is Christ.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, like that is Christ.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That is the crucifixion. That's what that is.
Yeah.
There's nothing weaker than a man hanging on a cross. Right? That's why the soldiers are like, come on, get yourself down. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they knew he couldn't. They knew he was weak. Right? You can't bring yourself down off that cross.
Mm-hmm.
That was that mockery, right? And when I hear the words, God's strength is made perfect in weakness, I think of Christ, because that's exactly what that is.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the way God works. That's why it's mysterious to us, I think, right? Because we think that strength is the way to get through the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
You just have to be strong. You know, you just have to be strong, right? But
strength can't be transformed. It's stiff. It can't be
it's not
turned
malleable.
It's not malleable. And, you know, I think, you know, a couple things that's encouraging about all this is that there's no like when we're talking about how messy this is, like there's no clean way to go through this, because it's not just, you know, God's the potter, we are the clay, but the clay actually has feelings and emotions and a perspective and doesn't know what's happening while God's molding it. Mm-hmm. And you're just like, you have all these fears and doubts, and you're just like, and you have and you'll say stuff like, what the hell is going on? I don't think God loves me. I don't think God cares. I think he's turned his face away from me and hit me with arrows. And then your friends will be like, are you backsliding? Are you, are you, maybe you need to repent. Maybe there was something bad you did. You're just like,
well, I have to say that over my lifetime, I had to learn the lesson that everything is making me, right?
Mhm.
And that means everything, right? And more so the things that are painful actually make me. And when my husband collapsed and I was, just screaming at God, it was because I didn't want to experience that creation, right? Like I was just like, no, I can't take anymore, and I've actually had that conversation with God where I said, okay, I don't need any more. I'm good now. Right.
Right.
Because I know that you're teaching me. I know that I'm being made, but I don't need to know everything. That's what I said to God.
Like, enough is enough.
Yeah. And that was while I was sitting in a psych ward watching some kid, with OCD walk around a pool table for hours on end, and I was just like, okay, I said, okay, Lord, I'm done now. I don't want to know everything,
Right.
because I asked him for wisdom once, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, okay. And it was kind of a throwback to that conversation.
Right.
Right. And I was like, can we just call it now? Like, like, I don't know if I could take anymore. And then when that happened to my husband, I was like, not now.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe when I'm 70 or 80.
Not
but
now,
not
though.
now,
Yeah.
like I just did. Yeah. And there's, it's all of that is hard. Like all of that was hard for me. Okay. But I couldn't have those conversations with God if I didn't know that everything was making me.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And the things that were happening to me, as painful as they were somehow bearable.
Mm-hmm.
Because now I'm not saying they were easy. Okay. I'm not saying that at all. But they were somehow bearable because I knew that I was in a process with God.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that it was almost like he had this faith in me. Right.
Yep.
That I didn't even have in myself. Right. I was just, I don't know if I can take any more, like that's what I said to him. I just don't know if I can handle anything else after this, and I was kind of hoping it was like graduation day. You're done now.
Congrats.
But I don't think it ever is actually, I don't think it ever is. And, but, I had the freedom. I guess what I'm saying is I had the freedom to demand something of him. And that was the not now. Like I super demanded that from God, and I don't know, if like 15 years ago, I would have dared to say that to God, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's the difference between being a servant and being a child.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, exactly. And, like I was talking to my priest afterwards about it, and he said, well, that's a blessing. And I said, yeah, it is a blessing, like that my husband lived, right? But I said, but the thing that I was thinking about afterwards was that it would have been a blessing if he hadn't too, and I would have had to figure that out.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yep. Well, I think that's a good note to end on.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Any last thoughts on 11 though? We didn't really go in deep on it, but I think it's so.
Zophar. Well, Zophar is just. Yeah, I don't know. I just think he's just a, like the others, right?
Yeah. More of the same.
More of the same. Yeah.
And there is a transformational thing that kind of happens through the friends too, but it's not for the good. It seems to be working in reverse for them. Like even in the order that we went from Eliphaz, it was kind of like the wise old traditionalist, to Bildad, the guy that's seeing it black and white, to Zophar, the angry. And it seems to sort of snowball here.
I was just reading that verse 7. Canst thou by searching find out God? Canst thou find out the Almighty unto perfection? It is as high as heaven. What can you do? Deeper than hell, what can you know? It reminded me of, I read the book Everywhere Present by Father Stephen Freeman. And he talks about the two-story universe. How we don't really believe that God is everywhere present, filling all things, right? Mm-hmm. And so we talk in terms of, or we think actually more in terms of God being up there and we're down here. And it seems like they have that same, God being removed in a way from them. That he's not right there in the midst of the suffering, right? He's far, far removed.
Yeah.
And this kind of gets back to the idea that I have that they're wanting Job to shut up because he's actually calling on God for a conversation, right? And as we know, and towards the end of the book, God shows up in a whirlwind. Can you imagine these guys? God damn it! I knew this was going to happen. This is not what I wanted. Right? Like we just want him to stay over there, up there, right?
Appeased and happy and
just removed. So yeah, interesting stuff.
All right. Chapter 12 is coming up next.